All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that and that you guys are all well acquainted. So, without further ado, I would like to proceed to the main event tonight. So, it's my honor to introduce Aaron Friedland. He's the founder and executive director at the Walking School Bus, also the founder and CEO at Simbi. It's an amazing online literacy platform helping learners to improve their reading fluency. We also have the amazing Rand Sommer. He's the director of operations at the Walking School Bus. And together they've done like a ton of work with United Nations, and they've been building solar powered classrooms for communities in Uganda, and they partner with a lot of organizations in India. So guys, please help me welcome Aaron and Rand.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Josh.
So yeah, I do again recommend just popping into speaker view, and John, if we can have everyone muted, that'd be great. So yeah, thanks guys. So basically, well, before I ask questions, do you guys want to share a little bit about yourself, or was that a good enough introduction?
That was really good. I just had one favor, and that is this is being videoed, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any chance we could put Surya onto speaker view just for a moment so we can see him? It looks like he's running on the moon.
All right, there you go.
Oh.
That's great. We'll just leave it on him for the whole night.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So yeah, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are really busy, and we're really excited for you to share your experience with us. So I guess I'll start. So like over the last 5 years, you guys have been running the Walking School Bus. You've had like huge accomplishments. You've like partnered with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, bringing social awareness of global economic development through your expeditions. You came up with the idea to use solar power to power portable classrooms. And then you've developed a tech, like out of that, you've developed a tech company, and it's really transforming digital transformation. So how can you guys share, like, how did you guys start all that?
Sure, yeah. I'm happy to start this off. So it actually started as a master's research question. And essentially the research question at the time was, how do you improve access to education? And what happens more specifically when students have to travel really long distances to get to school? And so at this point in time, I was doing a master's degree in economics. And I had previously spent time in Uganda. And one of the things that really stood out to me in Uganda was the distance that students were traveling to get to school, with many of them walking between 5 and 7 kilometers from home to school. And I remember I had been at the first time that I was in Uganda, I was doing economics as an undergrad at McGill. And I remember returning to McGill and just thinking, wow, we take our education for granted. Like, you know, if we're drunk or hungover or have a pimple or not in the mood, we just don't go to school. And the number of students who we were watching just really working, journeying great distances to get to school was staggering. And so what happened was, first, when I was in my undergrad, this is actually the first time I was in Uganda, I became quite friendly with a group of teachers and principals. And they had chicken coops at the school, and they used eggs. They used chicken coops to essentially produce eggs, which would be fed to the students. And so when I was in my fourth year at McGill, I started doing a lot of work with them to understand how do we maximize egg production so that they can actually produce more eggs to feed more students. And then fast forward a few years, when I was doing that master's, I returned back to Uganda to understand, well, how was distance actually impacting student rates of attendance? And it was on that trip that I started traveling to school with the students, just walking to school with them. And once we arrived at school, it was interesting to then see that many students didn't have actually any food. They would feed them at 11 a.m. And that was just because that was a more optimal time to keep students in school and to give them a meal. And then I was sitting in the classrooms, and I'm dyslexic, so I've always struggled to learn to read, etc. And you're in relatively overcrowded classrooms where English is part of the national curriculum, but many of the teachers don't actually speak English all that well. And a big part of my master's research question on this notion of distance and access to education or attendance rates kind of was predicated on the assumption that once students get to school, everything's going to be okay. Let's just get them to school. But after spending more time seeing just not enough nutrition and problems in the classrooms, really had to go back and rethink everything. And so then essentially the rest of my master's degree ended up becoming the baseline for what eventually grew into the walking school bus. It was founded actually during that period of time, and working with exceptional researchers and exceptional professors, we started doing some pretty inspiring and exceptional research into this area. And the organization continued kind of trucking along. And when Ron and I were reunited, we've been friends for ages, I had the opportunity to start working with him again. And he'll tell you more about it from his perspective. But essentially, the two of us together ended up turning what was like a really exciting project that had gained a lot of traction and had created quite a bit of impact. But the two of us combined really turned it into this more internationally known organization that now works with the UN and the Office of the Ugandan Prime Minister, and essentially creates impact above and beyond what either of us ever thought, I think at least, was possible. So those are the initial foundations for it. And then through this whole process, Simbi as a reading technology was actually developed, and then it grew out into a separate organization by itself. And the two organizations worked very symbiotically, if you get the pun there, in which the walking school bus so the walking school bus builds infrastructure that empowers access to education. So, solar powered classrooms and quite a few other interventions. And then Simbi develops software that empowers access to education. And so the two have a really beautiful working relationship in that regard. And Ron, I'm going to pass you the torch.
Thanks, Aaron.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, as Aaron mentioned, yeah, we were longtime friends, but we had, in full honesty, sort of lost touch a little bit. But I was definitely very impressed with the walking school bus from afar. I'd support it with social media posts here and there. But when I returned to Vancouver following the completion of my master's, Aaron was probably one of the first 5 people I reached out to when I moved back into town, because I just wanted to just be involved. I just thought it was interesting. And I also knew that Aaron is an awesome guy. I was like, why not volunteer, check it out, see what the organization's all about. It was definitely a good decision, because that spiraled the trajectory of my life for the following 3 years to where we are today. And I guess what always really inspired me about the organization, Aaron sort of touched on a few of the elements that we do that we're very proud of. But what I think the unique value proposition of the organization is that we're able to bridge the skill sets of budding academics, individuals who are in their undergrad or in their masters, who want to find a way to make an impact in a tangible way and see the application of the work they're doing in class and see how they can actually impact other people. And that is what always really blew me away. And of course, the holistic approach and the innovation of solar powered solutions and the applicability and relevance of that in so many contexts really attracted me. I guess, I guess the origins of the walking school bus for me, I started as a volunteer helping in communications, slowly got more and more sucked in. And I believe, I know we were in India on a research expedition. We conduct expeditions where we bring researchers to conduct field work with us in the field. And I was on a research expedition, and it was one of the final nights of the expedition, and it was such an inspiring trip. And for me, I was blown away that, you know, for the last 7 months, I had been communicating about this organization that I was involved with. And then when I was seeing it. I was seeing what I had been communicating for so long, and I was blown away. First of all, I was thinking, haven't been communicating this well enough. This is so much more beyond what I thought this is, and the potential that this enables communities to thrive on through the self-sufficient mechanisms that we develop in partnership with them. And yeah, I guess it was one of the final days of the expedition, and I remember sitting Aaron down, and I pretty much said, you know, we're at a point in this organization where we just need a little bit more manpower to make this go full speed ahead. And essentially we pulled out a napkin and we crunched numbers to see what we could do to make it so I could have a small salary, so I could actually make this, you know, my 15-hour-a-day job. And we figured it out, and here we are. And since then, it's been such an incredibly inspiring learning experience, and you know, just the benefit of working with researchers and inspired students who want to make an impact. We're constantly learning, and it's been such an incredible journey. I think I've lost track of the question.
No, that's perfect. You just kind of gave us a background how you guys like all started. That expedition that was in India, was that right?
Yeah, that was in India.
Can you, for those who don't know, can you share a little bit of background, like how you guys were connected to be in India as opposed to Aaron's work in Uganda?
Yeah, Aaron, do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, sure. By the way, Run, very well said. I'm personally taking notes listening to you speak, so I don't know about everyone else, but this is great. Actually, you know, I will share about India, and I also think it's just such a great story just in terms of how connections are made and where businesses can go. Essentially, I was in India because I had been invited to do a TED Talk there. And I had been invited to give a couple talks, and I was flying from Mumbai to Delhi. And inside the airport, I see a woman, and she's using internet, and she's connected, and the internet in the airport is not working for me. And so I asked her, I said, excuse me, like, would you mind explaining to me how you've got this internet working? And she says, oh, she's got her own little, you know, portable device, and that's creating the internet for her, and I'm welcome to connect to it if I'd like. Anyways, we get chatting, and it turns out that she is a PowerPoint designer. And I say, hey, that's fantastic. I'm actually giving a presentation in a little while. What are the chances you've got anything on literacy rates in India? And she had given me enough information for me to think that she actually may have something about that. And it turns out she did, because she had just worked on a PowerPoint for Plan International. And so she asks, you know, why do you want this? And I explain I'm giving this talk. And she ends up changing her plans to come see this talk the next day. And her name's Sukriti Sahar. And sitting backstage at TED the next day, Suki says, I'm coming on the next expedition. 6 months later, she's on the next expedition. And 6 months after that, she has started the walking school bus. New Delhi has incorporated the organization and has set up a team that are up and running and pretty functional. And essentially, the direct reason that India took place was because after Sukriti was in Uganda and after she was spending time with us there, she turned around and said, look, you know, I love what we're doing in Uganda and I find it incredibly inspiring, but the truth is India has the same problems. And I'd like for us to be tackling those. And she is just a force of nature, one of the most inspiring people you'll meet, an absolute doer. And these days, Ran and I speak with Suki once a week to, you know, catch up and discuss what the team is up to and to essentially make plans for the future. So that's why India.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, both of you, Aaron and Ran, thanks for sharing your I guess what has motivated you to this point today, and kind of like your why behind it, and some of the successes of the walking school bus to date. I know there are people in the audience today who are passionate about this cause of education and social impacts. It can be daunting for some who are passionate about them but don't know where to start to ideate solutions on a holistic scale, which is something you've mentioned earlier. What are some of the biggest challenges or the common challenges that you have encountered and overcome in your journey?
When you say in our journey, you're referring to just the organization on a day-to-day basis, eh?
Yeah.
So actually, Ron, I'm going to start this one if you don't mind. So actually, just to bring it back to the why once again, and a personal why, not knowing how to read, just as an example, is something that has been a barrier and a challenge to overcome. And then once again, you know, spending time, being able to see the incredible social safety net that Vancouver has afforded my family and affords essentially all of us in higher income countries. It's amazing to see just how much we have access to and sometimes how much we take for granted. And so being able to then spend time in the field and to see essentially what money and what the social safety net can do, and then recognizing that if applied in some of the communities that we work with, which thanks to technology in the 21st century is quite easy to do, that you can help people escape these poverty traps and these cycles. That becomes a personal why, but then it becomes an organizational why as well. In terms of the day-to-day kind of challenges that we face, I think the biggest would be the fact that any intervention, any study, any time you are looking to create sustainable change, it is challenging. And it's very easy to draw up a solution from the comfort of a coffee shop in Vancouver and to have all these great ideas and to think, hey, this is probably going to help a group of people I don't know all too well. And then we wonder why aid continuously fails. And we wonder why, you know, 50% of charitable donations, of charitable aid, are often not sustainably utilized. And so there's a great book on this called The White Man's Burden, which I talk about quite often and I would highly recommend to anyone who's interested. But the point is that sustainable change, to all the UX designers out there, as you know, is tough, right? Behavioral change is the most difficult thing that you can do. And so when you think about, just as an example, the process of coming up with an idea like a solar powered classroom, and then going from 0 to 1, from bringing something that doesn't exist and bringing it to fruition, and then developing the models on top of it. We have a solar charging revenue model so that the community members can come plug in their devices, pay a minor fee, which then goes to actually sustainably owning and maintaining that solar classroom. And so if you look at, I think that for me, what I've been accused of is having slightly rose-colored glasses. But the reason that I don't see this as such a significant challenge or problem is because we're so open about how iterative this approach is. And we know that the first time we do something, it isn't going to work perfectly. And we're very open and willing to embrace that we will fail. We'll fail forward and we'll learn. And the most important thing that we ensure as an organization is that as long as what we call unintended consequence or the omitted variables are not going to negatively impact the communities that we work with, and we'll do impact assessments ahead of time to ensure that. As long as we're confident that that won't happen, then we're happy to fail a little bit, but to discover new things and then continue to build and iterate. And so it's not always so daunting because it's a constant iterative process. That's from my perspective. But I think Run is the greatest integrator that I have ever met or worked with. And I'd be interested to hear what he has to say about this.
Thanks, Aaron. I feel like I'm on like a news show.
Back to you, Ran.
Yeah, you know, there are always challenges, no matter what. There's any organization that says that they're not dealing with issues or problems is just not being truth, in my opinion. The beauty of the organization is, as Aaron says, that we really embrace that reality, and we set up mechanisms to ensure that we are really transparent with our partner communities and the institutions that we work with, that the communities are leading the way. A solution's not going to work unless a community owns it and knows that it's theirs to manage. We're only there, you know, when we enter the field, we're there for maximum 10 days at a time. You can't make long-term change in 10 days. That's unrealistic, and we don't pretend that's what we do. We work so closely with communities, and we slowly integrate them in our approaches, and we engage with them, and we ask them questions, and they ask us questions, and we challenge them, and they challenge us. And that iterative process really creates like a bit of a safety net around each of our projects, because that it develops an immense amount of trust between the organizations and the entities involved. And the beauty of our projects, I find, is that community members know that their input is also their output. If they're putting their effort and their time into managing and working on different elements of projects, they know that they're benefiting from it, whether it's through whether it's through revenue, whether it's through clean water, whether it's through getting access to electricity. They know that they're a part of the solution. So we never enter any problem, it's even as when we're working with the UNHCR, it's very easy, and it's sometimes attractive when we're saying when we want to come off as we have the solution, we're here, don't you, like, no worries, we'll take care of everything. It's easy to say that, but we don't say that because there are many pieces to a problem, and the power of a solution is by collaboration. And that might even sound cheesy, but it's so true. And that's been the most the passion the communities show for the projects when we arrive, when we return to communities and we see how they've enhanced and developed their own systems and their own ways of managing something. We set something up, that if they're not able to connect with us for whatever reason, they develop their own innovation to work on it, to work and develop the project to make sure it can be maintained. And when we return and we see these kinds of instances, these small, really tiny details that slip through the cracks and don't get to our ears for whatever reason, it actually informs us, inspires us to share that knowledge with other communities, and develop an interconnected community between our communities. It's a really an inspiring process to be a part of.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. I was wondering, because you guys have taken on huge initiatives, whether it's like setting up electricity for a community, or like filtration of water and things like that. Is there a general framework that you guys approach these challenges? So let's say you want to set up solar power. So do you list down all the problems first, and then from there go? So I was wondering if you can share a little bit of your process, if you do have a general framework of approaching these big challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. We are I'm obsessed with this, so sorry if I talk too much about this, but our research is what is making everything possible. We have our think tank. We have a think tank of really incredible researchers who are so motivated and passionate And the approach is very much a research, it's pretty much a scientific method. It's a very clear-cut system. Obviously, every single project has different externalities there isn't consistency. But in general, the approach is you look at what the problem is, and then you kind of work backwards. And we, in collaboration with really talented researchers, economists, solar engineers, electricians, literacy teachers, we're able to develop and iterate through that think tank that we've developed. We also have a really incredible research and development coordinator. His name is Eli, and he's a really important part of that process because he helps create those connections between researchers as well. So if we have a solar researcher working on one element, we have a water catchment researcher working on another element, and they're both asking for maybe perhaps similar data sets that contribute to totally different elements of a solution we're looking to implement. You're able to bridge that connection, and that's also the power of the think tank, because it enables that sort of interaction and can prevent double work. Sometimes, even if you're working on different problems, you might be able to work with the same data set that was developed 6 months ago for another problem.
Gotcha.
And one thing I'll add to that, Josh, is that when you're working on a few different projects, and when you're working in a few different verticals, it can be difficult to, sometimes you wonder, exactly what you were asking about, right? Like what is your process for identifying like what you're going to start working on, or how do you want to actually just approach this wider problem, like thinking about a solar power classroom? And I think the answer is really quite a simple one, which is you ask why enough times, right? It's the law of first principle, or the first principle approach. And essentially, once you get down to that, you go why 5 times, you get down to this is the core problem, this is the root of the problem, and now we're going to build on top of this. And so when you take something like a Brightbox macro, a solar power classroom, or if you take a question like COVID research in the refugee settlements and getting students back in class, a lot of the time people can become very overwhelmed by just the amount of data or the amount of directions, and can struggle to figure out which direction should I start with? Where do I actually begin? And so I find this approach of just going down to the very bottom, figuring out what is the core problem, then let's figure that out, and we'll just keep building and building and building upon it. And that's definitely been a successful approach for us. One last thing I just want to speak to, if I may. First of all, shout out to Alan. Your comments are very beautiful in the group chat. But actually, you picked up on something that is worth speaking to. So there's an amazing book called Rocket Fuel, and Rocket Fuel is essentially, it was a PhD thesis that was turned into a book. And what these two guys did was they analyzed approximately 1,000 successful companies. And when they had looked to understand the core premise of what made these companies just so hyper successful, it came down to 2 really interesting things. So the one was just the team dynamic. And what they found within the team was that they always had the pairing of what you call a visionary and an integrator. And they identified that if you can have that dynamic duo that do have a growth mindset and are what you will call a visionary, which by the way is a terrible term and we can talk about that later. But if they have that, and then if they simultaneously have that integrator who knows how to bring ideas to fruition, those were the companies that are successful. And honestly, if you think about Run and I, we really are like having worked with other teams and having like currently running other teams, we are a very dynamic duo in this regard. And it's very rare to be able to find such a complementary team where you have this. And I'd highly encourage people who are thinking about growing teams or just want to think about, their own current team, to read the book, Rocket Fuel. Absolutely.
And just to add to that, and I totally agree, and it is cool, Alan, that you did you caught on to that, and Aaron, thanks for all the nice things you're saying. But the beauty about the dynamicism of our relationship is there's often a healthy amount of tension in some conversations.
I was going to ask.
I mean, luckily, we do have the privilege of also having a very unique friendship, and we're able to have that to work with. But it's really incredible that just we're able to have frank conversations. We're able to be fully expressive, which means that Aaron can share his wild, crazy ideas with me, knowing that if it's too wild, he trusts that I'm going to very quickly shoot him down. But then he also knows that he can push back on that. And that develops, sometimes gets us into some really, really great situations, which means sometimes more work. But, just that balance, I think, has been really effective the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I think it really speaks to you guys' character, because I can already tell that you need to have a certain level of grit, but also a level of understanding and humility to hear each other out. So that's good balance. So with that said, I'm curious, how have you guys been adjusting just with the lockdown, COVID, and just managing the last few weeks and months?
Yeah. Shall I, Aaron?
Take her away.
COVID has affected everyone. We're not unicorns. We are definitely affected. But since from the onset of COVID, yes, we had to cancel 4 fundraisers. We had to cancel 2 expeditions. We had to cancel this event. Things change. And from the beginning, we actually saw it as an opportunity literally from day one. We knew there's not going to be any advantage for us to push back and be angry. Like, this is the state of the world. And from the beginning, our attitude, which I think was really reflected across the entire team, was this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to take a good hard look at ourselves, look at what kind of sustainability mechanisms we should be setting up that takes into account pandemics, for example, and really seeing how we can leverage the skill sets of our team to create an ecosystem that can work and maintain, and not only maintain but thrive. And I can say, in full honesty, that has turned out to be very true in more ways than we thought. We've now we're working on the COVID response team with the UN directly, on working to reopen schools throughout Uganda, not only with our partner schools, and then separately Simbi as well, which is a reading and literacy application, which Aaron can speak much better to than myself, because I'm much more focused on the walking school bus. But the Simbi literacy application has enabled teachers and students to continue with their literacy objectives in the classroom, and use that as a tool. And I know that Simbi has developed their own COVID response plan as well. But what this has essentially done for us is our name has been thrown around by quite a few people, and they're seeing that the application of our solar powered and technology and interventions is not only applicable in the normal world, but is especially applicable in the COVID world. That's also been an incredible process. And again, we just, because of the way that the organization is set up with a think tank, which already has a pool of talented researchers, already partnerships, already on the ground in Uganda and India, these sort of realities that already exist as kind of a foundation allows opportunity to grow. So our research, COVID started, we were like, hey, researchers, want to think about some COVID response things we could do? And that led us to working on the UN Education Task Force and leading a couple interventions. So it's it's been a wild journey the last couple months, and I don't think I can include myself in the group of finishing all of Netflix.
Thanks for sharing, Ryan. Like you mentioned briefly that this event that we're hosting right now, online, was supposed to be an in-person, in real life event. So we can see how technology and digitization is playing a big role right now and into the future, not just with events and people gathering, but also education with classrooms going online as well across different countries. My question for the both of you is, what other trends do you foresee in the world of education, and where it's going, and what are you excited about?
It's a great question. So the other day I was on a Zoom call with a group of 85-plus-year-old Holocaust survivors. Now, they all know how to use Zoom these days. You have a group of survivors who speak to each other frequently, they like supporting each other, and because they can't support each other in person, they've started using Zoom, which, by the way, actually has a pretty shitty user experience from my perspective, but different story. And if you think about just the way that things are changing, you think about the fact that you have these people who, so we've got a group of Holocaust survivors who are now reading books. They're reading their own memoirs out loud on Simbi. Their willingness to adopt and to learn new technology, I think, is indicative of where the entire population is going. Seeing previously populations who didn't have patience for new technology or learning these things have started to realize that you have to actually adjust and adapt. And you're seeing a willingness that I don't think has ever existed before. And then what you do is you couple that with the idea that the current university system is also shifting online and is proving to people that not only can it move online, but that it has to move online. And what we're probably going to see is that it isn't really going to drastically affect learning outcomes or grades. We've already validated quite well that the existing university model is not necessarily the most effective education model. It's predicated on universities being businesses and essentially having to generate revenue. But it's not necessarily, and also on top of that, educators and professors are incentivized by publication and are not necessarily rewarded by being amazing professors, which doesn't lead to the greatest student learning outcomes either. So where do you see this move? Where do you see this impacting education? Well, in the university context, I think it's going to be fascinating. I think we're going to see a significantly greater shift towards either a fully online education system, which can be completed through like what Udemy's done with micro courses, or which is done as a more standardized degree. I think we're going to see a lot more individuals taking advantage of massive open online courses, MOOCs. So when I taught economics previously, one of the questions that always bugged me was why the other econ profs and lecturers didn't suggest students using Khan Academy. Because I can have a bad day as an educator, and then essentially my students pay for it. But if you have the greatest econ prof out there willing to teach the rest of the population, why not utilize that opportunity? So specifically as it relates to the university context, I think we're going to see a really interesting movement towards increased use of online education. I think you're going to see a massive upset in terms of what, like, for example, McGill University, their endowment fund is rapidly depleting. And we'll have to see what they develop. The exciting thing about this, though, is that what universities are going to have to do is make themselves relevant and meaningful. And as they see online courses to be the future, that will quite likely, and it's a bit of a prediction, but it will quite likely result in greater investment in terms of making online making online courses just that much better, that much more engaging, etc. So with that kind of investment in that space, we're going to have a lot more technology and interest in terms of keeping people learning and becoming lifelong learners, whether they're at home or wherever they are. So that's super exciting. I guess the last thing I'll mention is, or two other items. One is that what this means for, let's say, students in refugee settings, students in lower income country settings, is that now with the availability of just more technology to support learning, and essentially with internet or intranet being the only barriers, it becomes a hell of a lot easier to educate students at mass. So for example, if you think about how our Brightbox micros or macros have projectors, which then go into a classroom, which then teach 260 students simultaneously, there's a lot of really exciting opportunity there. And then the last thing I'll say is that from a primary perspective, in terms of students who are in kindergarten to grade 7, what I'm really excited to see is that as tech becomes just more ubiquitous, that we're going to start, I hope, placing less emphasis on rote memorization and more emphasis on helping students find what they're passionate about, helping students become just better members of society, who feel that they have the confidence and the understanding to take a problem, find something that they're passionate about, and just tackle it until they have solved it. And I'm really excited to see education for the next generation really place more emphasis on that. Because I just think if it doesn't, and if we have kids who are just calculators, and then for fun, they're just watching TikTok and Instagram stories, that's a pretty scary future of humanity, which would freak the shit out of me, to be honest. I'm
awesome.
Finished.
That is great. I wanted to add on to that because, in light of almost all businesses being forced to make changes to go digital during these times, it's likely we'll probably see an increase of innovation between the tech and businesses in the near future. So I was wondering, it's probably possible that there's going to be way more apps, way more platforms coming that are aimed to just get us more addicted to it in an unhealthy way, or even like you said, I guess education online, it's going to be more globally accessible, but I think there's just going to be a lot more noise in the internet. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how to balance, if you've considered this, how to balance the drive to encourage more users to engage in these digital platforms, yet not have them lose this sense of human interaction behavior. We talk about, if education is going online, I guess, they have these more asynchronous interactions, but then, anyways, I was wondering if you thought about just balancing that out.
Absolutely. I'll just kind of add on to that, if you don't mind. Essentially, I'm going to start with a quote. So, does anyone here know who Aldous Huxley is? He wrote Brave New World. And so there's a great quote by a guy named Neil Postman. And he's comparing Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. Orwell wrote 1984 and a few other big works. And essentially he says, what Huxley feared were those who would ban, what Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. And essentially what he's saying there is that Orwell feared that essentially information would be kept from us, that we would live under a dictatorship. Huxley feared that we would live essentially in the 21st century in which there is so much information everywhere that we don't even know how to access what is meaningful. Mm-hmm. Orwell feared those who would take books away from us. Huxley feared those who would give us so much shit that we wouldn't care about reading a book. And so now we have this dilemma. How do we think, why should we be contributing to this problem? Why should we be developing a tech platform that just keeps more people online and learning? And it's such a great question. The answer is, it's kind of a first principle approach. So where is humanity moving? Well, it's moving digital. So are we going to be able to affect and inspire significant change if we don't recognize the direction that humanity is moving in? Probably not as much. So once we recognize, okay, it's going digital, the question becomes, how do we do the best job of impacting positive change in that arena? So as an example, right now, every day, the top engineers from MIT, Yale, Stanford, Harvard, they get offered the best jobs at Google and Facebook to keep you scrolling Google and Facebook for another 5 minutes, because those organizations are tied to revenue dollars, right? Marketing revenue. So from my perspective, it becomes, well, how do we make sure that we are clawing back those 5 minutes? How do we make sure that we're keeping people reading and doing positive things for those extra 5 minutes and essentially compete with these big guys? And you have to recognize the direction humanity is moving in order to do that, is my perspective.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. It's a good one.
All right. I think this is a perfect time to open it up for Q&A. So I do see a few questions. Camilla, you have a lengthy one. So if you don't mind, I'd love for you to unmute yourself and share your question.
Hi, sorry, my question is long. I felt like it needed explanation. Basically my question, it's more about kind of something that I've been grappling with for a while, is I feel like there is a lack of interdisciplinarity, a lack of fields communicating with each other, even as close as international relations and sociology, and then a lack of sectors speaking together. Just recently, Sierra Club had a talk, and they were saying they had to do more and more collaboration within the civil sector. And I'm like, no, you need to like get some knowledge from tech and so on and so forth. And I was having a conversation earlier, and there were two gaps I identified with this person. And one was that the civil and public sectors are really, really far behind when it comes to adopting tech, even things as simple as A/B testing. And these things could be really beneficial when developing public policy on national or international levels, because then they'll be designing and iterating instead of just building, and letting that be for many, many years until it needs to be redone. And then the second gap is that there are many designers and coders that may be curious about the ethical and moral implications of what they're doing and the impact on society as a whole. But for example, let's say they're going through bootcamp type schools and not gaining this knowledge, and then going out and being practitioners in this space without that knowledge and without consulting with people who potentially have that knowledge. And my question is, have you encountered these gaps in your own work? And if you have, how have you addressed them?
It's an awesome question, Camilla. And great to see you again, or hear you again.
Amazing.
Run, can I start this one off?
Please.
You're going to pass me the mic? Yeah, cool. So Camilla, have we encountered it? Absolutely. Honestly, the reason that we developed the expedition model was essentially exactly what you're describing, but relating more to the lack of opportunity for students who were, whether they were UX researchers or economic development practitioners. Essentially, if you think about the average student who goes to, let's say McGill as an example, and let's say you're put into, or you choose to study economic development. So in theory, if you choose to study that field in second year, you're choosing it because the idea or theory of it interests you. You most likely haven't really had much more that is tangible to put you on that trajectory other than being inspired by a couple books you've read or just liking the concept of it. And then quite quickly you find yourself in fourth year and you have no idea what a development economist is, or what a field practitioner is, or what conducting a cost-benefit analysis actually is in practice. You've just read theories and read a few books, and a lot of the Todoro growth model, which is a model developed in the 80s, which just doesn't even apply today anymore. And so we actually thought, hey, this is a huge problem, right? If we want to take some really smart people and get them thinking about problems, how can we ask them to do that without giving them an opportunity to dip their toes and see what's going on? So we've definitely encountered that problem, and I think it's a really big issue. The way that we've addressed it is through this research-based, expedition-based model, which gives people an opportunity to, whether you're a UX designer or whether you are a solar engineer, to start researching a problem, meaningfully understand it, spend time in Uganda or in India, and just deeply understand the problem, and then start designing and iterating on that solution. And so, just ensuring that people have that understanding is so critical. The one positive thing that I will add, though, and it doesn't necessarily relate to us as an organization, although actually from a positive perspective from us as an organization, what we do see happening is students who do research with us, or just business professionals or whoever they are, we see their research and work taking on just new levels, new heights. And there's something really beautiful about doing research not for a grade. Don't get me wrong, you can still get your master's thesis researching with us, and we've had quite a few students do it. But when you understand that actually if this model's wrong, that it's actually going to cost a community money rather than supporting a community, when you understand that there is impact beyond just a grade that you're getting, it's just incredible how beautifully humanity can be kind of fueled. And so what I've just kind of commented on there is an incentive scheme, right? And one of the most beautiful groups that I've seen integrate exactly what you're talking about is the Nudge unit operating out of the UK, which is essentially it's an economic arm that operates out of the UK's government. Camilla, is that something you've heard of by any chance?
No, I haven't.
So I'm going to recommend a book called Nudge. And also for any designers out there, it's probably one of the better books you can read. But essentially, Nudge is a behavioral economist's journey into nudging slow-moving bureaucratic government in the right direction. And it was really the first time that in the UK you saw private business, public policy, and government all come together and to create this Nudge unit. And so one example of this is they realized that they just didn't have enough organ donors. They were struggling to have enough, to identify enough organ donors. And the Nudge unit's research ended up discovering, well, when people die, or before they, when you're essentially like filling out your insurance, you currently have to opt in to being an organ donor. So it's preset as that you are not an organ donor, and you have to opt in to being an organ donor. And some of the wording is a little bit complex and slightly frightening in nature. And so this group of analysts determined through A/B testing and a few other tests, what would happen if we just get them to opt out instead, so that you're naturally opted in. And if you don't like it, then you opt out. And the outcomes were just fascinating. It rapidly increased the amount of organs that were available. And so this whole notion of nudging has become more mainstreamed and popularized, and eventually led to a Nobel Prize in economics quite recently. Anyway, so the point is, I fully agree with you that it is a humongous problem, but I think we're starting to see, just by the fact that we can have Zoom calls like this and we can all get together, and we're starting to see more interdisciplinary collaboration, which I think is leading to just more optimal outcomes.
Definitely. Just to add a little bit to that, just to kind of share a little bit about how we try to navigate these sort of problems, which we do encounter quite often. It's very, very easy to get stuck in the weeds, because as you start learning more about something, you start learning about more problems and more issues and more, details that complicate a certain issue. And then you throw in other mixes, and you throw in other people, and then you throw in different opinions, and you throw different goals and priorities, and it can get mixed up really, really easily. And what we do in these instances, when, sometimes we'll kind of just get stuck in the thick of it all, and we're like, okay, well, how did we get here? Why are we talking about this problem? we're able to, what we do is we look back to the process. We look back to what is the overall goal, what are the stages that we've set out for ourselves, where are we at in the stage, what issue are we encountering along the process, and is the problem that we're dealing with right now that got us to this, this wall, is this actually addressing the problem that we're working towards? And when you kind of are able to just pull back, just kind of give a little, try to give as objective and, hindsight view as possible, that helps us really prioritize our priorities.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Can I just ask, how did you guys come up with the name Walking School Bus?
That's a very good question, Nathan. Well, it started from, if you remember Aaron's story about his master's thesis, about assessing the impact of student learning outcomes based on their distance from school. The idea developed into the walking school bus, and we developed our transportation initiatives, and that more so correlated with those solutions. But as we've also mentioned, the organization is a very iterative organization. And over the last 5 years, we've learned a lot, especially with, this underlying value that we have, which is impact first. The way that we make all of our decisions is through that notion. When you look at that, we've been able to really develop an approach where the ultimate goal is to scale our impact and impact the highest number of learners. So in fact, in the next 2 weeks, we are actually doing a massive brand change. We're actually changing the name of the organization to better reflect the outcomes and projects that we're conducting in the field, as well as leveraging the successes of Simbi, which is the technology, one of the kind of the cornerstone of our curriculum program. So we're actually changing the name of the organization to Simbi Foundation. And that is actually, if you tune in and you stick around, or maybe there's like a follow-up email or something, we can send you the link to our new website, which is running pretty much. And it's a very exciting adventure for us, and we're really confident. We're getting really incredible feedback. It's kind of a new chapter that where the goal is to show that we still have the same goals. Our goal is still impact first. Our goal is still holistic access to education. We're prioritizing our solar powered solutions and our curriculum programs, because we strongly believe, and just based on the research and the preliminary data that we're noticing, we're seeing that boosting our focus on our solar powered solutions and our curriculum programs will have the highest impact. So the highest return on investment. And with that comes, it's a much longer conversation, but that comes with a brand change, to help our audience better understand what we're doing and the relationships that we have with our partners. Yeah.
I'll actually add to that, Ron, if you don't mind.
Please.
And in terms of just the UX context, I want to speak to some of this. So the first is, we've been doing what we've been doing for the last 5 years. And so you develop a brand, and you develop collateral, and you develop a way of doing things. And change is tough, and it's a pain in the ass, to be honest. And you wonder, hey, is it worth it? Does it make sense to actually change our name? And so what we started to do was when we first started to feel like, hey, maybe there's a slight misalignment between the work that we're doing and the name of the organization. And as an example, one of the ways that manifested was us sitting down with the UN and them saying, hey, we're really excited about your Brightbox solar power classrooms. But can you tell us, what are these walking school buses? How do we get one? And then it's like, oh shit, really not in the mood to have to explain that to you right now. And you start to realize, okay, maybe there's a minor misalignment. But the other thing that happened over time is that we looked at what interventions we had were really successful and which were less successful. And what we've become really good at doing, and it's this notion of just not really having too much of an ego and being comfortable to say, we're happy to kill initiatives if they're not working as well as we want them to. And so over the years, what we've done is we've realized we're a relatively small, lean team. And you can't just continue to run initiatives because you started them and because you don't want to cancel them. If you can move forward towards what Ron has explained of impact first, if you can positively impact more people by being more deliberate, more intentional, more focused, then it is important to do so. And so there were certain initiatives and certain aspects of the program, including larger aspects of our transportation model, that we just noticed were not creating as much positive impact or return on investment that other programs were. And we noticed, if we stop running some of the school buses and start building more solar power classrooms, which have more sustainability built into them and break down significantly less frequently / never, well, that's a better way to help more people with the ultimate goal of reaching 3.5 million learners in refugee settlements. And so being very clear on where we want to go and being very honest with ourselves in terms of what's doing the most, supporting the most, that's ultimately how we reached that conclusion. And so I guess I'd also challenge everyone, whether it's a business or whether it's interpersonal relationships or whatever it is, being able to say, hey, am I just doing this because of the legacy of doing it? Or am I doing it because I want to be doing it and because it creates the value to me and the people around me that I want it to? And being able to have those pretty introspective, honest conversations with ourselves, I think leads to really beautiful outcomes. And so Run, I think, was about to ask this, but I'm not sure that he did. We do have this new site, simbifoundation.org, and we also have a really great form, and we're honestly really looking for as much feedback as we can. And so to follow Thaler economics or nudge economics, I'm going to assume that everyone on this call is interested in checking out the site and participating in this forum, unless you comment in the group saying that you're not. And so just gonna put that out there.
Way to opt us in, hey?
Josh, can I do that? Can I opt people in?
Absolutely. I just put in your website in the chat so people can link into that, or I guess copy and paste.
And I'll add the feedback form.
Great.
Oh, and just one thing that I'll add to this. First person to complete this feedback form.
Ooh, prize.
Yeah, just while we're on it, give me 1 sec. Ron, I'm doing it.
All right.
Must be cold out there, Aaron.
Surprise giveaway.
All right. This wasn't fully planned, but we're doing it anyways. So this is a very beautiful bag that is made inside. Oh, wait. 1 sec. Oh, I'm so happy we've got that on
on the recording, yeah.
On recording, here we go.
There you go.
This is a really beautiful bag that is made inside of the Bidi Bidi refugee settlement by some really talented and extraordinary women who are seamstresses in the settlement. And you're probably wondering, oh, this is also the logo for Simbi Foundation. And you're probably wondering to yourself, what could possibly be inside of this bag? And what is inside of this bag?
Drum roll.
Drum roll are these exceptional flip-flops. They're called 1,000 milers. They are made by some incredibly talented individuals in the refugee settlements. They are 100% recycled, made out of tire rubber. And they're called 1,000 milers because they last 1,000 miles and they're really comfortable to wear. And so whoever fills it out first, we've got a pair of these with this beautiful bag for you. And every 10 pairs of these help us actually, like every time we sell 10 of these pairs, one, we're able to send another scholar in the refugee settlements to school. And two, with the Simbi integration, you're actually able to read and listen to a book that your scholar has narrated. So that's just little piece of info I'll share.
All right, I have a little request for Ran. So there's some keen people wanting to click in, but they don't have permission. So if you're able to change it
Yes.
to those who have the link, that'd be great.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Okay, shall I dive into our giveaway?
Yeah, that's perfect segue.
All right, thank you, Aaron, for that. While you guys are hopping onto that link and filling out the survey for Simbi Foundation, I am just going to acknowledge and give a shout out to a local business in Vancouver who has been supporting the community and also today's Juice Labs event. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. All right. Oh, that's not what I want to share. Okay.
All right. Jess is figuring that out. If you guys have any, oh, yeah? Okay, go ahead.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to give a shout out to Coastal Rain. They are a Vancouver-based apparel printing company. And during this time that we're all going through, they have launched their Vancouver Strong initiative with 100% of proceeds donated to the frontline. So today they are contributing 3 very trendy Vancouver Strong dad hats for giveaway. If you guys haven't already, and I know a lot of you have, but if you've not yet, you can jump over to our Juice Labs Instagram page, which is at Juice Labs Creative. And our second most recent post has the details to enter, which is pretty much follow us and like that post to go in the draw. I am going to do the draw in 1 minute, so you guys have a minute to join in if you'd like. This channel is also where we announce our upcoming events. It's always announced here first. Our events include cool get-togethers like this. We do dinners, we do workshops, meetups, always meeting some great people during those times. So, alrighty, I'm going to, all right, if everyone's ready to go, I think
We should play some, be nice to play some background music.
I know, I want to put some like game time music on. All right.
All right, guys, while that's happening, Jess, can I add in one more thing?
Yes, please. I'm going to get the spinning wheel ready while you do that.
Yeah. If, could you turn on the other slide, the contacts?
First yeah, definitely. I can do that.
Okay, well, yeah, so for some of us who are looking to, make an impact for good in our communities as, the world's slowly opening up from COVID, if you guys want to reach out to Aaron or Ran, you guys can reach out to them on this slide. You got walkingschoolbus.com or simbifoundation.org, and there's Aaron and Ran's email as well. So, yeah, feel free to reach them out. And yeah, ask them how you can start, what's their approach in like tackling certain huge challenges and breaking it down to actionable items. All right.
Alrighty. I'm not screen sharing anymore, am I?
No.
Okay. Okay, I'm almost ready.
Awesome.
Well, guys, I just want to say thank you. This has been really awesome and such a pleasure to connect with you and your community, and really wonderful. So thank you.
Definitely, I can second that. It's been a really great conversation and a really good group of people. Really been interested speaking with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've jotted down so many notes and amazing insights that you guys have given us. Like, just failing forward, don't be afraid to just, take the first step, iterate after that, being transparent with the community. Thanks for the awesome recommendations for Rocket Fuel and Nudge for those books. I know there's a lot of keen readers. And yeah, just really just setting those goals and then break down the stages and then being willing to, you know, pull back, reassess, and make changes if necessary. Really appreciate that. Does anyone have any other questions? Or Jess, are we ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it. Can everyone see the spin up? All right, I'm gonna spin it. I think we're gonna go 3 times.
The suspense.
Oh. Oh.
Yes.
Right on.
No way. I feel like that's not fair.
Great, congrats.
Oh, God. That's so funny. Thank you. Wow.
All right.
John.
And Sean.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Loving the confetti.
All right. So I've got Ren and John so far. Last one. Oh,
yes.
Cindy.
Awesome.
Congrats.
All right, thanks, guys. So I'll be in touch with each of you for your postal addresses. We're going to send these to you directly.
All right, everyone. That concludes our meeting. Thank you so much for joining. It's so great to see everyone. Like I said, if you guys want to stay in touch, please reach out to Aaron or Ran or ourselves. And yeah, we hope to see you guys soon in person. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good night, guys.
Thank you.
Great meeting, everyone.
Awesome. See you guys.
See ya. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Aaron.
guys.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, guys. This was awesome.